Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, the UK's biggest council, Birmingham, has made an absolute hash of its finances. It's basically gone bust and it wants the rest of us taxpayers to help bail it out. Got to be honest, it is not the first council to do this. It won't be the last. What on earth is going on? And free school meals. What do you think to this? Sadiq Khan basically is rolling it out for all primary school kids. Is this a good idea? If you are a wealthy parent, should taxpayers be picking up the bill to feed your kids? And get this, it's a year ago since Liz Truss was voted in as Tory leader. What do you reckon a year on? With misty-eyed reflection, was she the right person for the job, the wrong person? Would the country be better now or worse? And there's a bill going through Parliament that could see property owners fined, get this, £15,000 or get a one-year prison sentence if you don't comply with net zero regulations. Honestly, I think this world is turning into some kind of clown zone. What do you make to it all? We've got it all to come and more. But before we do that, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Birmingham City Council has effectively declared itself bankrupt. Europe's largest local authorities issued a notice which prevents all but essential new spending after admitting it's unable to meet an equal pay claim of £760 million. The council's already paid £1.1 billion to settle historical claims. All new spending, with the exception of protecting vulnerable people and statutory services, will stop immediately. More onshore wind farms are expected to be built as a result of a relaxation in the rules from the government earlier today. The changes will see projects supported by local people approved more quickly. Local areas will also have a greater say in how developments are considered. They may even benefit from cheaper energy. Now, the new rules come amid fears of a Tory rebellion over the issue. Rishi Sunak said back in October he planned to keep a ban on new onshore farms. The Shadow Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, says reluctance to build more facilities has led to higher energy costs.
The government is being held to ransom by a bunch of Tory backbenchers who since 2015 have stopped onshore wind being built in England. And that has raised bills for families by £180 for every family in Britain. You know, we're going through a cost of living crisis. Surely now those individuals, those Conservative MPs can see that it's much better to have onshore wind built and cut bills for families.
The Schools Minister says the government's been very proactive in dealing with the concrete crisis and has been issuing guidance since 2018. Speaking to GB News, Nick Gibbs' comments come after the Education Secretary apologised for using strong language while expressing her frustration at the situation. Both Rishi Sunak and Gillian Keegan are under growing pressure as schools across the UK have fully or partially closed. Mr Gibbs says Gillian Keegan's comments were off the cuff.
She was frustrated by the fact that the Department for Education, the civil servants, have been working very hard in terms of dealing with RAC issue. We've been very proactive in dealing with RAC. Since 2018, we've issued very detailed guidance to responsible bodies. And these are the bodies that are legally responsible for school buildings, which are the local authorities, the academy trusts, dioceses, but we provide them with the best advice based on the technical advice that we get about how to identify and monitor RAC.
However, the Shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth, says the government's handling of the matter is an abdication of responsibility.
I think today, look, when you've got sort of roofs at risk of collapse in various schools across the country, pupils really worried. You've got the Education Secretary expecting to be thanked and congratulated, and parents across the country, teachers who work in schools, and pupils, because some of these pupils are old enough to understand what is going on, want you to fix this and don't want any more of your saying, oh, nothing to do with me, Gov. That is, frankly, an abdication of your responsibilities.
There have been a further 1,300 redundancies at the collapsed retailer Wilko. The news comes after discount store B&M agreed to buy up to 51 Wilko outlets from administrators for £13 million. It's understood the majority of the new stores are expected to be rebranded as B&M. Laughing gas is to be banned, and those caught in possession of the popular drug will face unlimited fines or up to 2 years in jail. New measures expected to be introduced this year will also see tougher penalties for the supply and production of the drug. Officially known as nitrous oxide, laughing gas is the third most used drug among 16 to 24-year-olds in England. It's been linked to antisocial behaviour with heavy use, possibly leading to anemia and, in more severe cases, nerve damage or paralysis. 10 people have been taken to hospital after a 52-seater bus was involved in a crash with another vehicle on the Cleddau Bridge in Pembrokeshire. Fire and rescue services say one driver who was severely trapped had to be taken by air ambulance to hospital, and many of the bus passengers are suffering with a variety of injuries. Spain's Football Federation has sacked Jorge Vilda, the coach of its victorious World Cup women's team. Vilda was the only member of the coaching staff not to stand down in protest after midfielder Jenny Hermoso was kissed on the lips by the Federation president, Luis Rubiales. This is GB News. I'll be back with more at the top of the next hour. But now it's over to Michelle.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside with the CEO of First Property Group and the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib, and the political commentator, Joe Phillips. Welcome to both of you. You know the drill as well on this programme, don't you? It's not just about us, it's about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind? Get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at GBNews. My first email is Gaynor in Colchester. She says, Michelle, why do so many media outlets basically focus on everything doom and gloom? You're saying that so many people now say Britain is broken, but you reckon it's just us media that are basically relishing pouring petrol on the fire. You're saying that, thank goodness, school buildings and concrete doesn't seem to be featuring on today's agenda. What do you make to that? Do you agree with Gaynor at home? I do desperately try to search, by the way, for positive news stories. If any of you know of any, you are always welcome to get in touch with me. I tried once on a Friday to do positive news story. I had to abandon it after I think about one show because I genuinely could barely find any positivity that's going on. And I've decided not to talk about concrete tonight because everyone just wants to batter the government and Gillian Keegan. But you know what? This stuff only had a 30-year lifespan. So what about everyone that went before, that was building schools and all the rest of it with those concrete matters? What about them? Anyway, I've just decided to move on tonight because other problems are afoot. So I'm sorry, Gaynor, you're not going to be sitting here high-fiving yourself because I do have more bad news for you, I'm afraid, especially if you're in Birmingham, because Birmingham City Council, I have to say, the largest local authority in this country, it is the latest now in seemingly a long line that have issued what we call Section 114 notices. Basically, to summarise that, it's like you're waving like a white flag of surrender. You're putting your hands up. You're basically saying, I've made a hash of managing my finances as a council. You're basically reaching out to central government for a bit of assistance and all the rest of it. Birmingham is the latest council. And I think whilst I'm talking, actually, I might just get up on the screen. I'm shrinking in my chair. My chair is going down. I know. What
there
a
you are,
strange,
Gaynor. That is going to
what a
cheer her up.
strange sensation. I could feel myself going down. I do apologise. If you're wondering what on earth's going on, I think my chair's a bit bust, like Birmingham City Council, quite frankly. Anyway, if I can, I'll get you a list of the councils on the screen before I bring Ben in. So if we look at this, just to give you a little bit of context, because this is not just Birmingham. You've got Birmingham, you've got Woking, you've got Thurrock, you've got Croydon, you've got Northumberland. Let's keep it rolling. Move on to the next one because I assure you, ladies and gents, there's more. There's more. Keep going. We've just done Ben. We've done this one. Mm-hmm. We've done. Move on to page 2. What's going on in the background?
You've got Kent, which is warning. I know. They haven't declared yet, but they're warning they're in trouble. There's something like 26 councils.
There's 26 that are on the cusp of it. Ben Habib, let me start with you on this. Birmingham, they've been speaking out today. Deputy Leader has been speaking out today. They're blaming it on all kinds of things. An IT failed project. They're saying that adult social care is going up. Business rates, income is going down. They're saying that they've had £1 billion worth of cuts, essentially, from central government. What do you make to some of this?
Well, it's a perfect storm,
and equal pay as well. I forgot that one. Yeah. Can't forget that. That's massive.
Which is a subject in itself. But, you know, this is a perfect storm for the vast majority of institutions in this country. The cost of doing business has gone up. the cost of borrowing has gone up, and income levels are under pressure because the economy isn't growing. I know we're going to talk about Liz Truss later, but it's a classic example of why growth in the economy is so important. If the wheels come off your economy and growth doesn't keep up with the ever inexorable march of costs higher and higher, something has to give. And what we're seeing is this now manifesting itself in the local authorities across the country. And as you said, Joe, they're not alone. There are 26 others, and the number's going to rise. I read an estimate that around the country, there's going to be a deficit of £2 billion over the next 3 months in local council incomes. They've raided their reserves to get over this hump, but there's only so much raiding you can do of your reserves, and eventually you go bust, and you provide the essential services that you have to, and you scrap everything else. It's a disaster. It's a real sign of broken Britain.
Gloria said she didn't want people to use that phrase. Was you not listening at the start of the programme? See, Gloria, he wasn't paying attention, Mr. Habib.
I'm afraid
I call you
broken.
the housewife's favourite. I might have to rescind that title from you because Gloria reckons Britain's not broken. She says it's the pundits that are putting that message out there.
Well, I can point to very many examples of why it is broken, including, of course, the border down the Irish Sea, which literally constitutionally breaks the United Kingdom.
I'm not going to start you on that one because I need to bring Joe in on the council. I tried, Gaynor, I tried.
So you mentioned the equal pay thing. So that's £760 million. This is going back to 2010 when they were found wanting because they hadn't paid women working for the council the same rates as men. So they've got that they've got to pay. But I think, when you look at some of these councils on the list and you look at Croydon is a perfect example of a council that thought it could do something amazing, that it could go and build houses and become basically a property developer. And it launched a scheme called Brick by Brick. It was a total disaster. And you can see that replicated across the country where councils... Many councils do amazing things and many councillors are there for the right reasons and they want to serve the people that they represent. But there are too many who think they want to leave a lasting legacy with something that is very expensive. They're not business people, by and large. And councils seem to veer between being risk-averse, which means things don't get done, and then taking terrible decisions. I mean, one of the other reasons that Birmingham's in this terrible pickle is because they got an IT system that wasn't fit for purpose, and they've now had to spend an enormous amount of money fixing it.
See, now, sir, before I was sitting on your TV screens of an evening, my prior professional career, I used to be an IT consultant. And what I used to do was I used to go in and I used to work at a board level with organisations, large organisations that were doing what we would call business transformation programmes, so huge technology IT projects. And I cannot for the life of me understand how a project... So this particular one, it was an Oracle ERP system. That's what they were trying to do. They were trying to make all of their kind of HR systems and things like that a little bit more slicker. They estimated that project would cost something like £19 million. They've had 3 years' worth of delays. That project is now looking likely to cost something like £100 million. And what I found fascinating is people just kind of go, oh, yeah, we've got this failed IT project. It is, to me, it's an absolute scandal.
Yeah, and you wouldn't let
Where
that
is the
happen in
audit?
a business, would you?
Well, I'm afraid it does happen. I mean, IT projects, as you probably know from your time in IT, can be a black hole.
Not the ones that I used to run.
Yeah. But then look at the post office, and I mean, that cost...
Yeah, the Horizon scandal.
Absolute tragedy to so many postmasters and postmistresses and their families, many of whom, went to prison.
Yeah, I mean, often the pursuit, just on IT projects, often the pursuit of an IT project is for perfection, and you end up fixing a problem that you never had or seeking to fix a problem you never had and creating a bigger problem. And we've seen that time and time again with IT. I'm not suggesting that council shouldn't move with the times, but it is,
But often what you have is you have an external consulting house that's very expensive. They come in, they're disconnected from the business. So what they're doing is they're saying, right, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do. They're not very integrated in terms of getting the requirements from the business and working with the proper stakeholders. They don't have full stakeholder stakeholder buy-in, then the wheels start coming off slowly and slowly, and then it just kind of becomes like this out-of-control cat that's flying down this track and no one can get a hold of it. I've just been reliably informed that I now have page 2 of the document to show you that I was trying to show you at the start, which is the other councils that have issued Section 114 notices. We were going through some of these at the start. Yes, you've got Slough, we've spoke about Croydon, Nottingham, Northamptonshire. And this, as we're saying, this is just kind of the current crop, and there will be more. But what I want to see, because I'm pretty appalled by this, I have to say. So if I just pick Birmingham as an example, Labour Council, these guys had an investigation, basically, that said that there was a lot of problems in this council. So then the kind of central Labour group then replaced the leader.
Yeah, he was removed,
yeah, and the deputy leader. But then I sit there and they're all crying, saying that they've lost this £1 billion from central government. They're trying to put the blame on the Tories. But you've spent £1 billion, to your point, on this equal pay situation. And I just think, how can you have got yourselves into this much of a mess? And let me quote you this, everyone, because I was absolutely appalled by what she was saying. She is saying that she is, when I say she, this is the deputy leader of the Birmingham Council, she's essentially saying that they started restricting their spending in July. They've put in these, proper spending controls in July. And I think, excuse me?
But this, yeah, absolutely. And you were absolutely right to draw attention to it. And I think the point you make about things like IT, and it could apply to anything, Michelle, that there's a consultant who's
rigorous spending controls.
Yes,
that was the direct
and of course
quote.
They only came in May, these people. But what has been going on in the meantime? And the trouble is that you've got people who don't know the right questions to ask and say, hang on a minute, why is it? So there's another report and then somebody's on holiday and then we'll have a meeting when that person's back, and then so-and-so's away. And so time goes on. I mean, you see it all the time. And meanwhile, the real business of local authorities, which they have to, they're statutorily obliged to look after vulnerable people, and the social care bill is going up all the time. But they're not... frankly, they shouldn't be playing with business unless they know what they're doing.
Yeah, but it fascinates me because they do all this on other people's dimes, don't they? So it's not. This is not. They're not speculating with their hard-earned cash. They're speculating with other people's money.
Yeah, well, I mean, Joe makes a very good point. In the run-up to lockdowns, I think a number of councils had borrowed £6.5 billion to invest in commercial property, which is definitely not their core business. But they were doing it because interest rates were so low. They thought they could take advantage of low interest rates. They bought commercial property, which was ostensibly yielding a reasonably high income for them. The cost of borrowing was much less than the income they were earning, and they thought happy days. And then, literally, a year later, lockdowns happened. They lost their tenants, they hit the skids, and now they've got a perfect storm with their commercial property portfolios because interest rates have gone up, impacting the cost of their borrowing, but also reducing the value of the assets they've got. And what's going to happen, Michelle? Central government's going to bail them out. And what does that mean for us? It means our taxes are going to go up, or national borrowing is going to go up.
Or central government will bail us out. What we're talking about there is everybody that doesn't live in Birmingham
and this
now having to bail out those councils.
And this is the socialist spiral to which I've been referring for months and will refer to again when we talk about Liz Truss. You cannot tax your way to prosperity. You end up breaking the machine. And these machines are now broken. The whole thing was kicked off with lockdown, but we're in a spiral out of which we're going to find it really difficult to emerge.
Well, John says Britain's not broken, Michelle. It's an absolute car crash. It's even worse than Brooke. Steve says what sanctions and punishments will fall on these councillors and the council executives. He worries that they will be rewarded for failure. I actually agree with you there. What I would like to see is a little bit more focus on misconduct in public office. How can you get something so very wrong? And why would you just be able to just sail off into the sunset with your gold-plated pensions when you do so? Prison is where I would like to see some of these people. I would. You probably think I'm being a bit harsh, but I do. You've got.
Well, some of us may end up in prison with the new laws they're about to pass.
Yeah, he's talking about net zero and the sanctions. He's laughing at me. Honestly, I think if some people were actually properly held held accountable for their failings, I think this world would be in a better place anyway.
Well, that
Michelle
starts
Dewberry.
at the top.
Yes.
With government.
Anyway, if I get told one more time to go to a break, I'll be in trouble. So I better listen to my advice. When I come back, I want to ask you a simple question. Should all children get free school meals in this country?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7, alongside me the CEO of First Property Group and former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and the political commentator Joe Phillips. A few of you mentioning about the council situation then, the bankrupt councils, suggesting that council tax will be raised to help bail out these councils. Well, that ship has already sailed because in Birmingham, for example, the highest award without a referendum, so almost 5%. Any Brummies out there, you will already know that you have had your council tax hiked already, and that situation is replicated throughout the country. Let's talk free school meals now. Do you have children? If you do, you might think, well, yeah, quite frankly, taxpayers, yes, you should be paying to help me feed my kids. If you don't have children, you might be a little bit less sympathetic to that view. I found this interesting because in London, Sadiq Khan is very proud of this initiative. All state primary school kids will now get free school meals. There's been calls to have this rolled out nationwide. Joe, what do you make to that?
Well, all children in England, reception year 1 and 2, get free school meals anyway. Then it varies depending on where you live. It's slightly different in Scotland and different in Wales as well. The problem, I think, is that, you know, I care, as you know, we've discussed it before, I care very much about health and nutrition and good food. And I think if there are kids who are going to school without a proper breakfast, with, crisp sandwiches and bars of chocolate and inappropriate stuff, or nothing, then that has an impact on their learning, it has an impact on their fellow pupils. And in the long term, investment in children to have one decent meal a day would be quite a good thing. The problem is that when you get into the means testing for free school meals after year 3, the figure, the threshold, is so low. It's £7,000 a year. So,
Or being on universal credit.
Well, at a certain point, but you've still got to be within this low thing. So, first of all, there's the concern that if you then take on a couple of hours' work, are you going to tip yourself over but not earn enough to pay for school dinners? The sensible thing to do would be, and I suspect that, in a cost of living crisis, people will not have the appetite for free school meals for every child at primary school, but I do think it would be an investment in public health. But you could raise that threshold to something a bit more realistic, like £20,000. I mean, the reality is that there are people going to food banks, there are people living in temporary accommodation, there are people who have got, a microwave and a kettle. You can't feed children properly on that. So you end up with takeaways or, stuff that you've bought from the supermarket on the way. And I just think, children need nutrition. If you give it to them at school, you know what they're going to get and what they're going to eat.
And Habib?
Well, I think Jo makes some good points, but you have to take responsibility for your own children. If you bring children into this world, you've got to make sure that you've got the wherewithal to look after them. And the notion that every child should be fed at the state while they're at school, I don't think is a sound one. Parents have got to take responsibility for their children. The state already spends a huge amount of money on educating these children. We already have the state nannying through, nannying through parents, not the children, nannying the parents, taking away parental responsibility in a whole host of ways. Increasingly taking younger children away from their parents, encouraging parents to put them into child daycare centres at the age of 9 months. In Jeremy Hunt's last budget. So I think maybe the threshold should be increased. I was of the understanding that anyone on universal credit gets a contribution towards their children's school fees, but free children's meals. I'd have to check that. But the £7,000 per annum, if that is the limit, I agree is too low.
It's ridiculous.
It is too low. But a universal everyone gets a free meal, I just don't think is the right direction of travel, and it's for giving parents the responsibility they have to their own children. It's a bit like the notion that was brought in, suggested a couple of months ago, that anyone who has more than 2 children, at the moment universal credit basically stops at 2 children, that cap should be removed, and no matter how many children you have, your benefits should go up, and that is just daft as brushes.
But just to go back to your point, Ben, about parents taking responsibility, which of course most parents will try and take responsibility, but people's circumstances change. They get evicted, they find themselves homeless, they find themselves out of work, they find their suddenly their partner leaves them or they become bereaved.
But that's a threshold issue then, isn't it,
Yes, exactly.
Jo? Yeah.
But I think we have to get away from this idea of the deserving and the non-deserving poor. We should be in a position to support children whose parents are unable to do it for a variety of reasons. But, the idea that somebody cannot feed their child and the child is going to school hungry is appalling. It's absolutely shocking. And we know...
It is, but we're not talking about that. That's not the suggested policy.
But if someone is so poor that they honestly, truly can't feed their own child, then that person would already be getting free school meals for that child, so that child would be taken care of.
Yes.
What we're talking about now is a parent that earns, I don't know, whatever, 70 grand a year, now getting free school meals for their kids.
But that was always the argument about family allowance, that it was the wine fund for the middle-class mummies who'd meet up for the yummy mummies who'd use it. While other people would... Well, I mean, whether or not that's still the case. But, but the idea of giving it to the mother in the old days was so that the mother had actually got some money that she could use for the children in case Dad was spending it in the pub or at the betting shop. Now, one would like to think that those days have changed to a certain extent. But I just think, of course, the problem is always with means testing. If you do means testing, you end up with a mean benefit. But 7,000... pounds a year as a threshold is utterly
It's
ridiculous.
too low.
And it needs to be looked at. And that would seem to me to be the sensible way round it, that you don't necessarily say everybody gets it, but you bring the threshold up to something that would also help people who are, the poor but working poor.
And, of course, the other thing they should do is cut taxes so people have more money in their own pockets to decide how they spend it on their children.
You're going to mention Liz Truss in a minute.
I was on the verge of mentioning Liz Truss.
We're coming on to Liz Truss, but
all roads lead back to it.
Well, all roads lead back to Liz Truss, he says, which is just as well then, because I am talking about her because it was a year since she was announced as the leader of the Tories. It's flown by, hasn't it? But before we get on to that, let's have a little look at the weather, shall we?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. As we go through the next 24 hours, some of us will have a bit of low cloud and fog overnight, but then it's the return of the hot sunshine tomorrow, albeit with the chance of a few showers. Looking at the big picture, and you can see high pressure dominating the weather across the UK, but we are going to have something of an easterly wind pushing its way in, and on that easterly, we're going to drag in some low cloud, some sea fog in from the North Sea, affecting eastern parts of England and also eastern Scotland, where we're likely to see a little bit of drizzly rain overnight. Elsewhere, further south and west, clear skies, a few pockets of mist and fog though, and temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying above 20 Celsius tonight, a tropical night for some, but a difficult night for sleeping. A cloudy start then down the eastern side of the UK on Wednesday, but that low cloud, that murk, is going to quite quickly burn back towards the coast for most of us. I say for most because across eastern parts of Scotland we're likely to hold on to some of that low cloud. Otherwise, lots of sunshine around, but perhaps a bit cloudier for some, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland. Look at those temperatures though, a little bit higher than today, likely to see highs around 32 or 33 Celsius. Into Thursday, and there's the chance of some heavy thundery showers making their way northwards up the western side of the UK. More central and eastern parts of the country are likely to stay drier and sunnier, and temperatures are going to be similar to tomorrow, really. Again, likely to see highs of 32 or 33 before something perhaps cooler by the weekend.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
There you go. I could have saved him a job. It was the same as yesterday. Basically, it's going to be absolutely mafting. Do you know what that word means?
Absolutely what?
Mafting.
Mafting. No, what was the one that somebody said last time Ben and I were here? Somebody from Wales.
I'll come on to that. What's mafting? Do you know?
I haven't got a clue.
Right, so both of you don't watch Dewbs and Co, because if you watched it yesterday, they'd know the answer to that. I'm not happy. I'm going to kick them off. I'm going to get a new panel. They've got absolutely no commitment to the cause, I can tell you. You'll all know what it means because we went through this yesterday. Peter says it's not the business of the state to replace the responsibility of the parents, Michelle. That is a sentiment that's coming through thick and fast when it comes to asking whether or not the state should universally feed our children. Get me your thoughts, GBviews at gbnews.com on that one. Ben Habib says all roads lead to Liz Truss. That's what he said. So we shall jump aboard that road. We shall travel in that direction and reflect, because it is a year since she was appointed as the leader of the Tories. Would this country be in a better place had she held those reins? You tell me.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock today, alongside the CEO of First Property Group and former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and the political commentator Joe Phillips. One of my viewers has just been in touch saying, Mick, what a disgrace, suggesting that men don't look after and pay for their children. I think he's on about you.
I wasn't suggesting it. What I was pointing out was that the original introduction of family allowance was given to the mother in the days when very few women had their own money and went to work because there were feckless husbands, and I'm sure Mick isn't one, but there are feckless husbands, feckless
She
wives.
doubled down, Mick. She doubled down. What do you make to that? I've got to stand back. I've got to back you up on this. Mick, I'm sure you're an upstanding, decent guy, but there's a lot of guys out there that, quite frankly, they don't pay for their kids. I'm sure you all know some of them. Shall we move on? Today marks the one-year anniversary that Liz Truss was elected the leader of the Conservative Party. I can't even believe it. It was a year ago. It feels like literally 5 minutes ago. Anyway, she, of course, defeated Rishi Sunak. She had 81,000 votes there or thereabouts. He had about 60,000 votes. Now, obviously, she did not last long, 40-odd days. I do kind of, when I get to these anniversaries, take a second just to reflect on what the country perhaps might have been like had she continued. What do you think?
Well, I'm very glad that you're reflecting on this, because I think it was tragic what happened.
You redeemed yourself after blatantly not watching my programme when you're not on it.
It was tragic what happened to Liz Truss. Liz Truss had recognised for the first time in 25 years, across Tony Blair's government all the way through to Boris Johnson, that actually for the country to prosper, you have to grow the economy. That taxing, borrowing and spending, which is effectively the way the state has operated for that 25-year period, doesn't work. It's that approach to economic management that got us into the trouble in which we are in. She recognised that it had to pay to work, that the working and middle classes needed the burden of both tax and regulation reduced, including small, medium-sized enterprises and independent traders, because she wanted to bin that IR35, if you might recall.
I do.
Which was trapping them in the tax net. She also recognised...
But a lot of people would push back on that and say that a lot of people... IR35 affects a lot of people unfairly, but there are a lot of people that misuse IR35 for their tax gains.
Sure. But she absolutely got the need for growth, and she also got the mechanism to drive growth. Sadly,
Go on.
So, sadly...
No, I was about to ask you a question, but I thought I'd let you finish. Go on.
Sadly, the organism of the state didn't like it because it would necessarily have brought the state under pressure.
But why didn't she have the chops then to stand up against that pressure?
That is the great shame. The Bank of England was against her. The Bank of England was selling government bonds the day of and leading into the mini-budget. And by selling government bonds, they were taking cash out of the economy, pushing the cost of debt up. And it was partly Bank of England action that brought the pension funds under pressure, which then they said they had to bail out, and they blamed it all on the mini-budget. They blamed the collapse of sterling on the mini-budget, but actually currencies across the developed world were going down at quite a pace at the time that the mini-budget came out, because the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates and sucking capital in. And they used all of that as an excuse to effectively eject Liz Truss from office. And they brought Rishi Sunak back in, who has done more of the same, which is do his best to keep interest rates down, which he hasn't succeeded in doing, by the way, keeping interest rates down so the bloated state can go on affording its bloated debt levels. And Jeremy Hunt hasn't got a view at all on the importance of reducing tax. And I want to say one last thing before I go. Margaret Thatcher inherited a broken economy. She inherited an economy with high inflation. But the first thing she did was cut income tax, albeit from higher levels, but she recognised the tax burden had to be cut to get people into work.
Well, you say you want to say one last thing before you go, but I've got bad news for you. You've got another 20 minutes here.
I wondered where he was going.
Anyway, Jo, your thoughts?
Well, you know I disagree with Ben on this, and I think Liz Truss was an absolute unmitigated disaster. Not only was she elected leader of the Conservative Party, she was Prime Minister, as you say, for 49 days. So Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, the most recent of our Prime Ministers, 5 or 6 we've had in the umpteen years, have been put in place by less than 0.12% of the electorate, which I think is a shocking indictment of the state of our democracy. Now, I know
But hang on, because them's the rules and that is the framework, and people will be looking in and shouting in about people like Gordon Brown.
Absolutely,
people was all right about that.
Completely. No, and I completely agree. I mean, there should have been a proper election. However, one of the things that Ben and I have discussed quite often, and I know Ben would like to have seen the Office of Budget Responsibility abolished completely, but they are still there now, and they were there. And one of the reasons that the markets got frit, to use Margaret Thatcher's phrase, was because Kwasi Kwarteng, the Liz Truss's Chancellor, and Liz Truss were refusing to share their information with the OBR. Now, that, frankly, is arrogant.
They weren't refusing, they wanted to move at speed.
Well, then you could argue that if you go at it
Do you think that was a mistake in hindsight?
I do think it was a mistake, because they had this wretched organisation, the OBR, which everyone now sort of manifests into some sort of paragon of fiscal rectitude. And what they should have done was manage the OBR as a result of the pedestal on which it's been put. But the OBR is a fundamentally failing organisation.
Yes, I know, but
but it's important to get that out there, Jo. At the time that she was doing her mini-budget, the OBR was predicting the national borrowing requirement for this year would be £177 billion. In that context, some of her budget moves may have been demanding. As it happens, it's turned out to be about 90 billion. They were out by a factor of 100%. Well, it's absolutely hopeless.
But nevertheless, and we know what you think about the OBR, they were there. She should have had a conversation with them, and so should her Chancellor. If you go at things like a bull in a china shop, which I don't know the woman, I've never met her, but she always
But you didn't like her from the start. I did.
Well, I remember a conversation with you and Alex Dean when you both went down my throat when she was Foreign Secretary, because she used to
remember, not only do I remember it, I've got a clip of it.
Oh, I knew you were going to show that.
Don't let me down, back office people. Where's my clip?
It'll come. Liz Truss, our Foreign Secretary, who seems to have a different outfit every day for a Barbie doll who is a Foreign Secretary.
Barbie doll?
And Alex and Michelle jumped down my throat and said, you know, I was being sexist. The point I was making, that she was more keen in showing off a different outfit with a different backdrop, which is what Barbie is for, you know, Barbie at the hospital, Barbie at the airport, Barbie, etc., etc., that you couldn't possibly take her seriously. And these were photographs that were taken by her official photographer. Why do we need to see a picture of the Foreign Secretary, she then was, running in a pink tracksuit across Brooklyn Bridge?
She might be trying to connect a new audience to herself.
Well, she was, but it was all about
none
her.
of those are relevant, frankly.
No,
none of that's relevant.
But they are relevant, in the same way as, there are...
It's relevant to me because what I think it reflects, I think there's a lot of people in society that before she even took office, people had already made their mind up. They'd made decisions about her based on whatever it was. They decided that she was going to fail. And we talk about the ONS. It is primary school level to show your workings, like primary school children that are doing maths, they are always told in exams or wherever it is that you're doing stuff, how did you get to that answer? So I think actually I did have a lot of regard for what she was trying to achieve, but there were basic schoolgirl errors.
But the OBR was only formed in 2010. It was formed by George Osborne. It's a relatively new body.
But it doesn't
and it
matter.
hardly gets any forecast right.
But it's there.
But the point about government is not to be in hock to the OBR, not to be led by the nose by some ostensibly independent body which perpetually gets things wrong. The job of government and the job of Liz Truss was to deliver the promises she made during the Conservative election campaign, and that was to deregulate the economy, cut taxes. And that's what we needed. We still desperately need it.
But, Ben,
make it a very short
government is answerable to Parliament, not the other way around. And
but OBR's got nothing to do with Parliament or government.
But even if you think it's flawed, it was there. And I think, like Michelle says, you should have done. The only thing I would say about it, it would be interesting to know, had the Queen not died the day after, and government and everything stopped for 2 weeks, whether she would have gone quicker.
Well, what, even quicker than 40-odd days? Oh, blimey, what do you think? Right, I will go to a break. When I come back, I want to ask you a question. Do you think you should ever, you, me, us, general public, should ever have to go to prison or be fined a substantial amount of money simply because we've not done what the government has told us to do in order to try and meet net zero?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
all sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock alongside my CEO of First Property Group and former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and the political commentator Joe Phillips. Clive, I've got your email about your new title for the RBR. He did make me chuckle, but it is tea time, so I cannot read it out. He's got a good description of what he says RBR could potentially stand for. I'll share it with you when we're not on air. Speaking of former Prime Ministers, by the way, did you see the official portrait of Theresa May that was unveiled? Look at it. Look at that fine specimen. It was unveiled. It's going to be in Portcullis House. It talks about the interpretation. It says the portrait, the aim was to produce not just a convincingly physical likeness, get it back on the screen as well if I can, just so you can cast your eye over it while I'm describing it to you. So not just to portray a convincing physical likeness, but also a psychological characterisation. There you go. Apparently, it should possess. It goes, in short, it should be a mystery. I wonder what Theresa May, when she looks at that, what she thinks.
I don't know.
Well,
it's an accurate depiction, but it is not very flattering. And it does have the look of she looks almost, when you look at it quickly, like one of the sort of a Regency soldier.
Well, she says she's absolutely thrilled with it. You want to hear what Ben Habib said about it in the break, but I won't tell you what he'll
Is it as bad as the OBR?
It'll shatter the illusions of him being a housewife's favourite, because he was not complimentary about it. Anyway, I do want to try and squeeze something else in before I go, if I may, because under government proposals, ministers could perhaps now create new criminal penalties and fines for non-compliance with net zero targets. This is all basically part of a big bill. Some people say it might not come to pass, but the fact that it's even being considered and proposed in the first place concerns me. Ben Habib?
It's about to be passed into law. It's done all its readings and everything else. It's at the final stages.
Reading in Parliament, isn't it?
It's going to go into law. And this absolutely proves why net zero is being delivered in the worst possible way. If the move towards net zero was something that was beneficial for us generally as a nation, we would willingly adopt it. We would all do whatever was necessary because it would be better for us, it would be cheaper for us, the economy would do well within it. But because it doesn't work for the nation, because it does burden us with costs, because most of us are being dragged into it, kicking and screaming, even though the emissions from this country are less than 1% of global emissions, we're being dragged into it, kicking and screaming. And in order to absolutely drive the nail into the electorate, what the government's going to do is put us in jail up to 12 months if we don't comply with the regulations. It utterly proves net zero is a failed policy.
And a maximum fine as well of up to
£15,000, yeah. Custodial sentence. Can you imagine?
It is an absolute scandal that the government can give itself new powers for a new criminal offence without proper scrutiny in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords. Now, you say it's had its third reading, the energy bill, but this has still got to be debated in the Lords before it goes back.
It's been to the Lords.
It's been to the Lords.
Yeah.
Well, it'll go back on a ping pong
Yeah, so
thing.
it's following the
course. So it is not enshrined in law yet.
Pretty close to it.
Well,
it's en route.
It's en route,
we'll agree.
maybe. But maybe when people talk about it and say that it's undemocratic, it's wrong, that actually there will be some amendments before it gets there. I mean, we're only 2 months away from the King's speech, so we'll see what happens. I mean, there are all sorts of penalties and enforcements about energy efficiency regulation already. The idea that you're going to make this a criminal offence is utterly ridiculous, because what should have been happening for years and years and years is all new build properties should have been much more energy compliant, much more environmentally sensible, with solar panels, electric heat pumps, that sort of thing. And that hasn't happened. We're still building houses on floodplains. We're still building houses that are ruining the water table. We're still building houses that have got none of these mitigations in, and we've got the worst insulated hard to heat property.
But the reality, the reality is that net zero is economically emasculating. You can't deliver the kind of product that the government wants in an economically sensible way, particularly with an economy that is going down the tubes in ever-decreasing circles, because we're not growing as an economy. This is a massive burden on the British economy at a time that it can least afford. And we talk about the cost of living crisis. It is exacerbated by net zero. We're being taxed all over the place for net zero, and now we'll go to jail if we don't comply.
Well, no, that's not wrong to say that, and we're not going to jail because it has not become law yet.
If passed, you could potentially go
yes,
to
I know,
jail.
but
There
I
you
mean,
go. I'll
let's
summarise it like
not
that.
be like
Tony says you would need a heck of a lot of prisons. Tim completely agrees with that. I think you can go to prison. I think you've got all your priorities wrong in this country for the things that you can go to prison about. And I actually think it's pretty damn offensive, really, that I started my programme talking about the fact that actually you've got these council leaders that literally cannot take control of their own finances. All of us taxpayers will have to pick up the bill. That's all right. No prison sentences dished out there.
Yeah.
But heaven forbid anyone actually in their own spare time doesn't conform to this ridiculous agenda of insisting upon net zero when it suits people, lecturing us about net zero while simultaneously jetting off in their own private jet and all the rest of it to have conferences about net zero. Makes me laugh. Your priorities are all wrong in this country. Anyway, Joe, Ben, that's all I've got time for. Do not go anywhere. She's itching to say something else. She'll have to zip it because it's Nigel Farage next. She can tell me in the break. No.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. As we go through the next 24 hours, some of us will have a bit of low cloud and fog overnight, but then it's the return of the hot sunshine tomorrow, albeit with the chance of a few showers. Looking at the big picture, and you can see high pressure dominating the weather across the UK, but we are going to have something of an easterly wind pushing its way in, and on that easterly, we're going to drag in some low cloud, some sea fog in from the North Sea, affecting eastern parts of England and also eastern Scotland, where we're likely to see a little bit of drizzly rain overnight. Elsewhere, further south and west, clear skies, a few pockets of mist and fog though, and temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Some places staying above 20 Celsius tonight, a tropical night for some, but a difficult night for sleeping. A cloudy start then down the eastern side of the UK on Wednesday, but that low cloud, that murk, is going to quite quickly burn back towards the coast for most of us. I say for most because across eastern parts of Scotland we're likely to hold on to some of that low cloud. Otherwise, lots of sunshine around, but perhaps a bit cloudier for some, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland. Look at those temperatures though, a little bit higher than today, likely to see highs around 32 or 33 Celsius. Into Thursday, and there's the chance of some heavy thundery showers making their way northwards up the western side of the UK. More central and eastern parts of the country are likely to stay drier and sunnier, and temperatures are going to be similar to tomorrow, really. Again, likely to see highs of 32 or 33 before something perhaps cooler by the weekend.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you